Hey, good evening. By the way, I'm Alberto Isaga Jr., the presenter. And good evening, Dr. Thomas Austral Jr. Good evening, sir. So this is my topic, Republic Act number 11199, an act to govern the relationship between landsholder and tenants of agricultural lands, leaseholds and shared tenancy. So, Section 1. Section 1. This act shall be known as the Agricultural Tenancy Act of the Philippines. So, Section 2. It is the purpose of this act to establish agricultural tenancy relationship between landholder and tenants upon the principle of school justice to afford adequate protection to the rights of both tenants and landholders, to ensure an equitable division of the produce and income derived from the land, to provide tenant farmers with incentives to greater and more efficient agricultural products, to bolster their economic position, and to encourage their participation and communities. So, Section 3. Agricultural tenancy is the physical possession by a person of land devoted or agricultural belonging to or legally possessed by another for the purpose of production through the labor of the farmer and the member of the immediate farm household, in consideration of which farmer agrees to share the harvest with the latter, or to pay price certain or ascertainable, either is produced or in money or in both. So, Section 4. System of agricultural tenancy, their definition. Okay, agricultural tenancy is classified into leasehold tenancy and share tenancy. So, Section 5. Section 5. As a tenant shall mean a person who himself, and with the aid available from within his immediate farm household, cultivates the land belonging to possessed by another with the latter consent of purposes of production, sharing the produce with the landholder under shared tenancy system, or paying to the landholder a price certain or ascertainable in produce or in money, or both, under the leasehold tenancy system. A landholder shall mean a person, a natural juridical, who either as owner, leasely, usufructuary, or legal possessor lets or grants to another to use or cultivation or his land for consideration, either in share under the shared tenancy system, or a price certain or ascertainable under the leaseholder tenancy system. Agricultural year is the period of time necessary for the raising of seasonal agricultural products, including the preparation of the land and the sowing, planting, harvesting crop, provided, however, that is case of coconut, citrus, coffee, rami, and other crops more than one harvest and obtained from one planting. The word agricultural year shall mean a period of time from a preparation of land to first harvest, and period of time from the preparation of land to first harvest, and thereafter from harvest to harvest. In both cases, the period of time may be shorter or longer than a calendar year. So, farm implements include hand tools or machines ordinarily employed in the farm enterprises. Work animals include animals ordinarily employed in farm enterprises. The words include carabaos, horses, bullocks, and etc. And then, pulling of the seedlings is a piece of farm work in which seedlings are uprooted from the seedbed immediately before transplanting. Final harrowing, in the last stage in the last stage in pulverizing the soil into fine particles and readying the field for transplanting of the seedling. Reaping is a cutting of rice stalks. Harvesting shall mean the gathering of the fruits or produce of crops other than rice. Piling into small stalks used as a stem in a rice share, tenancy shall mean that the piling into several small stalks within the tenant's holding of a rip and bundled stock containing the grain preparatory to their transportation to place designated for their threshing. Piling into big stock used as a term in a rice share, tenancy shall mean the piling into one huge stock of the several small stocks and fried and bundled stock containing grain which constitute the entire harvest of tenant from his holder preparatory to threshing. So, proven from practicals include those sound farming practices which have attained general acceptance through usage or unofficially recommended by Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources. So, fair rental value in an amount of money not in excess of allowable the perception plus 6% interest per annum on the investment computed at its market value. Provide, however, that the fair rental value for the work, animal or animals, and farm implements required to produce the crop shall not exceed 5% of a gross harvest for the animals and 5% for implement. And provided further that whenever a tractor or power and necessary implement are utilized interchangeably and work animals in the same holding during the same agricultural year, and rental shall not exceed 10% for the combined services. And the next, and immediately after as used in act shall be exclusive of the last day of harvesting, threshing, or processing in the next 5 days and after. And then, immediate from the household includes the members of the family of the tenant and such other person or person, whether related to the tenant or not, who are independent upon him for support and who usually help him operate the farmer enterprise. Incapacity means any cause of circumstance which prevents the tenant from fulfilling his contractual obligation and thus opposed by this act. Inspect means to examine and observe. However, such examination and observations shall not include any act of imitation or correction. Auxiliary crop is any products raised other than the crop to which the cultivation of the land is principally devoted, and excluding the produce of the lot referred to the section 26. So, section 6. Tenancy relationship is a juridical tie which arises between the landholder and tenant once they agree expressly or impliedly to undertake jointly the cultivation and land belonging to the farmer, either under the shared tenancy or leasehold tenancy system, as a result of which relationship the tenant acquires the right to continue working on the cultivating the land unless he is deposits of his holding for any just causes enumerated in section 50, or the relationship is terminated in accordance with section 9. Section 7. Tenancy relationship. Tenancy relationship may be established either verbally or in a writing, expressive or implied. So, Section 8, limitation of relation. The relation of landholder and tenant shall be limited to the person who furnishes land either as owner, leasely, an usufructuary, or legal possessor, and to the person who actually works the land himself with the aid of labor available from within his immediate farm household. So, Section 9, servants of relationship. The tenancy relationship is extinguished by the voluntary surrender of the land by or the death or incapacity of the tenant, but his, her, or the member of his immediate farm household may be continue to work the land until the close of the agricultural year. Section 10, contract nature and continuity of condition. The terms of condition of tenancy contracts as stipulated by the parties or the provided by law shall be understood to continue until modified by the parties. And Section 11, freedom to contract and several. The landholder and the tenant shall be free to enter into any all kinds of tenancy contract as long as they are not contrary to law, moral, or public policy, except in case of fraud, error, force, intimidation, or undue influence, with the such contract in reduced to writing and registered as hereinafter provide. The latter shall be exclusive evidence of that has been agreed upon between the contracting parties, if not denounced or impugned without 30 days after its registration. Section 11. If the tenant is to pay the landholder leisure or consideration in excess of the amount prescribed as fair rental value as determined pursuant to provision of this act for the use of work and animals, service, and or farm implements belonging to the landholder leisure, and case it is agreed between the parties that the latter shall furnish and any or all of this item of production. Said contract shall be contrary to law, morals, and public policy. In a shared tenancy, if the tenant is to receive less than corresponding share for the different contribution be made to the production of the farm as the hereinafter provided, it is stipulated that the tenant or any member of his immediate farm household shall without compulsion perform any work or render any service not connected with the tenant's duties and obligations provided under this act. So Section 11, in leasehold tenancy. In the tenant lessee is to pay to the landholder lessor as a consideration for the use of the land an amount in excess of that and hereinafter provided for the kind and class in land involved. Section 12. From the registration of contract. A contract tenancy is a writing. In order to be exclusive, as evidence shall be drawn in the quadruplicate in the language of dialect known to all the parties, thereto, and signed or thumb mark both by the landholder or his authorized representative and the tenant himself before two witnesses, one to be chosen by each party. If any of the parties does not know to read, one of the witnesses to be chosen by him shall read the content of the documents to him. So, Section 13. Section 13 is a registry of tenancy contract. For the purposes of this act, the municipal treasurer of the municipality wherein the land which is the subject matter of tenancy contract is treated shall keep a record or should contract registry of tenancy contract. Section 14, change of system. The tenant shall have the right to change the tenancy contract from one of the shared tenancy to leasehold tenancy and vice versa, and from the crop sharing arrangement to another of the shared tenancy. If the shared tenancy contract is writing and is a duly registered, the right may be exercised at the expiry of the period of the contract. So Section 15, interested on loans or advances. On all loans or advances obtained by the tenant from the landholder in connection with the cultivation, planning, harvesting, and other incidental expenses for the improvement of the crop planted, as well as loan or advances for the subsistence of the tenant and his family, the interest which may be stipulated shall not exceed 8% centum per calendar year. So, Section 16, Memorandum of Loans or Advance, any obligation referring to any amount either in money or in a kind, including the payment of interest, which the tenant may have received from time to time as loan or advance from the landholder, shall be void unless the same or some note or memorandum thereof be a writing in a language or dialect known to the party charged and subscribed by said party or by his authorized agent. Section 17. From the final accounting. The final accounting between landholder and tenant at the end of each agricultural year shall be effected within 10 days after the threshing and case of rice, and within the same period of time after the harvest or gathering of the fruit and the case of crops. And Section 18, settlement of debts. So, once the accounting is made, any amount of money which the landholder may have advanced to the tenant for expenses of cultivation, harvesting, or gathering of the crop, or for his own private use, as well as any amount of grain of agriculture products advanced for his subsistence and that of his family, shall be paid by tenant out of his share, either in gain or in a money at the option of the latter. So, Section 19. Exemption from lien or attachment. 25% of the tenant's share of the produce of the land and shared tenancy, or of the entire produce and leasehold tenancy, one working animal and one of each kind of farm implement belonging to the tenant, provided that the value of such work animal and implements do not exceed from 500 pesos shall be exempt from lien and attachment. So, Section 20. Use of official weight and measures. In all transactions entered into between the landholder and the tenant concerning agricultural products, the official weight and measures of the government shall be used. And Section 21. Ejectment, violation, jurisdiction. All cases involving the dispossession of the tenant by the landholder or by a third party, and or the settlement and disposition of disputes arising from the relationship of landholder and tenant, as well as the violation of any the previous of this act, shall be under the original an exclusive jurisdiction of such court as may now or hereafter be authorized by law to recognize of tenancy relationship and deputies. And part 2. This is the part 2. Okay, part 2. The share system, chapter 1, common provision. So, this is a continuation, section 22, rights of the tenant. Rights of the tenant. Okay. Rights of the tenant. The tenant shall be free to work elsewhere whenever the nature of his farm obligation warrant his temporary absence from his holdings. The tenant shall be aside from his labor have the right to provide in any of the contribution for production whenever he can do as indicatedly and time. The tenant's dwelling shall not without his consent be removed from the lot signed to him by landholder unless there is a severance of the tenancy relationship between them as provided under section 9 or unless the tenant is ejected for cause and only after expiration of 45 days following such as severance of relationship or dismissal for cause. And if the tenant is dismissed without just cause and he is constrained to work elsewhere, he may choose either to remove his dwelling at the landholder cause of demand that the value of the same from the landholder at the time of the unjust dismissal. The tenant shall have the right to be indemnified for his labor and expenses in the cultivation, planting, or harvesting, and other incidental expenses for the improvement of the crop price in case he is disposed of his holding, whether such a dismissal is for a just cause and not provide the crop still exists at the time of this dispossession. Okay, let's move on. Section 23. Okay, obligation for the tenant. It shall be obligation of the tenant to cultivate and to care the farm. Yes, that's true. And growing crop and other improvements entrusted to him as a good father of a family by doing all the work necessary in accordance with proven farming practices. So, to inform that the landholder advance of any trespass committed by third person upon the farm, to take the reasonable care of the work animals and farm implements in use, to point undertaking he shall not use the work animals and farm implements entrusted to him by the landholder or purposes other than those intended or allowed their use by other persons without the knowledge and consent of landholder. Landholder na pala. So, any of the following shall be considered just a reasonable cause for the tenant to terminate the tenancy relationship: cruel, inhuman, or offensive treatment of the part of the landholder in the landholder of his represent towards the tenant or any member of his immediate farm household. None of compliance on their parts of household without of the obligation imposed upon him by the provision in his act, contract, and commission or a crime by the landholder or representative against the tenant or any member his immediate farm household. Section 24. Prohibition to tenant. It shall be unlawful for the tenant, whenever the area of his holding is of 5 hectares or more, or is sufficient size to make him and the member of his immediate household fully occupied in its cultivation, to contract to work at the same time on 2 or more separate holding belonging to the different landholder under any of tenancy, without the knowledge and consent of the landholder with whom he first entered into tenancy relationship. It shall be unlawful for a share tenant to employ a subtenant to furnish labor or any piece of work required of him under this act, except in cases of illness or any temporary incapacity of his part, which eventually the tenant or any member of his immediate household is under obligation to report such illness and incapacity to landholder payment to subtenant in whatever form for services rendered on the land under his circumstance shall be account of the tenant. Subject to probation of the next preceding paragraph, land entrusted for cultivation to leasehold tenant shall not lease be assigned by the tenant to another person, except with the writing consent or the leisure. So, okay. Section 25. Rights of the landholder. The landholder shall have the right to choose the kind of crop and seeds which the tenant shall plant in his holding, provided, however, that if the tenant should subject, and court shall settle the conflict according to the best interest of both parties. The landholder shall have the right required to use or fertilize the kind of corn shown by proven farm practices to the adapted to the requirements of the land. And the landholder shall have the right to inspect and observe the extent of compliance on the part of the tenant with the terms and conditions of their contract and the provision of this act. In case where the crop has to be sold and processed by before division and the tenant has no representative, the landholder shall have the right to deal with the millers or processors and representation and tenant. Okay. Obligation. Okay, section 26. Obligation of the landholder. Okay. The landholder shall furnish the tenant an area of not less than 1,000 square meter where the latter may construct his dwelling, raise vegetables, poultry, pigs, and other animals, and engage in minor industry to products of which shall occur to the tenant exclusively. Okay, section 27. The landholder shall not dispose the tenant of his holding except for any causes enumerated in section 50 and without the cause having been proved before and disposed authorized by the court. Otherwise, he shall, aside from the penalty of fine and or imprisonment provided for any violation of this act, be liable to the tenant for damage to the extent of the landholder right under the section 2022 at this act. Okay. The landholder shall not be responsible for the payment of tax levied by the government upon land which the subject matter of the contract, and it shall be unlawful to make the tenant bear in part of all the sum either directly or indirectly. So the landholder shall not require the tenant to directly any part of tenant canon or other consideration which he the former may be under obligation to pay to a third person for the use of the land. Okay, section 28. Expenses for feeds, fertilizer, paste and weed control expenses, the same amount of seed and seedling used to production of any crop shall be deducted from the gross harvest and returned to the party who furnished the same. The cost of fertilizer and expenses for pest and weed control as evidence by sales invoice shall be paid out of the gross harvest and returned to the party who advanced the cost and expenses. So section 23, irrigation system. The cost of construction of irrigation system excluding distributory canals shall be borne exclusively by the landholder. So section 30, auxiliary crop is a case in land and planted to an auxiliary crop. The tenant shall receive 80 per centum and the landholder 20 per centum of the net produce, provided all expenses of production and borne by the tenant. So section 31, cost of fertilizer and etc. When to be advanced by the landholder. Whenever the use of fertilizer or the application of insect disease and rodent control measure and directed by the landholder, he shall advance their costs, which shall be deducted from the gross produce. So chapter 2, price share tenancy. Section 32. So section 32. Share basis. The party shall own rice land which produce a normal leverage of more than 40 calvins per hectare for the 3 agricultural year next, presenting the current harvest received as a share in the gross produce after setting aside the same amount of palay used as seed, and after deducting the cost fertilizing, paste and weed control, paying and tracing the amount corresponding to the total equivalent of their individual contribution computed as follow. Section 32. Contribution. Land, the contribution and participation. First, we have a land, 30%. Second, labor, 30%. Third is farm employment, which is 5%. And 4, we have work animals, which is 5%. Work animals in harrowing and fell imaging 5%. And before transplanting, 5%. Transplanting, 25%. So that's it. Section 23, contribution and participation. And then let's move on to section 33, share basis on the second class land on rice land which produce a normal average or 40 calvins or less per hectare for the 3 agricultural year next, presenting the current harvest. Participation for the contribution of the land shall be 25%, and that of labor 35%, reimbursement not allowed. So that's section 34. Contribution of share in the contribution to the production of the crop in the form of cash, grain, or services once shouldered or rendered alone by one party may not be reimbursed by the other party after the pays or passes or work requirements in the joint undertaking shall have been completed. So, Section 35, sharing of expenses. In the case of landholder, the tenant agree at transplanting, the latter may engage the service of a person or helpers to perform this basis of farm. Work provided to rates for each shall have been previously determined and agreed upon between the landholder and the tenant. In case of disagreement upon said rates, the party who undertakes to the corresponding share in the harvest after deducting the expenses of repairing. So, Section 36. Further rights of the tenant. In addition to the provision of Section 22, the tenant shall have the right to determine with the scatter to said to transplant, seeding, and rate of harvesting, provided they shall be in accordance with province farm practices and after due notice to the landholder. Choose the treasure which shall trust the harvest whenever it is the best available and the locality and the best suited to the landholder and tenants and needs to provide the rate of change equal to or lower than the rate charged by the owner or the other treasurer under similar circumstances, provide further that the case where there are more their tenant to selection of the majority of the tenants prevail, provide finally that that if the landholder is the owner of a treasure and it is ready and willing to grant equal or lower rates under the same condition, the use to landholder and treasurer and shall be given preferred. Okay. Apply Section 36 again and apply appropriate pest and sec and disease and rodent control measure whenever in his judgment such action is necessary. Provide, however, that if a tenant fails to apply any of the above control measure after landholder has made a request and writing for such action, he shall be liable for any loss resulting from such failure. So, apply fertilizer for kinds of shown by proven from practices to be adapted to the requirements of the land, provided the landholder and has not exercised his right under the Section 2025 to require to use such a fertilizer. Section 37. Further the rights of the landholder. And in addition of the provision of Section 25, the landholder by himself or through his representative by determine the proper height or pilapils or dikes or according to the local practice, the location and size of irrigation canals, the sites for the stocking of the harvest, provided it shall not be further than 1 kilometer from the center of the area cultivated by a majority of the tenants. The date of threshing. So, Section 38. Labor what is a constitute. The tenant shall perform the following as a labor contributed by him under Section 32. So, the preparation of the said bed, which shall include plowing, harrowing, and watering, and the said bed and scattering of the said and care of the seedling. The plowing, harrowing, and watering of the area is a cultivating except final harrowing of the field as an item of contribution specified in Section 32 of this Act. So, Section 38. Section 38, the maintenance, repair, and weeding. Number 3, the maintenance, repair, and weeding of dikes, bodies, irrigation, canal, and holding. Number 4 is a pulling and bundling of the seedling preparatory or their transplanting. 3. Care of the growing plants. Number 6 is gathering and bundling of the reaped harvest. And number 7, the piling of the bundles into small stock. 8, the preparation of the place where the harvest is to be stocked. Number 9 is gathering of the small stocks and their transportation of the place where they are to be stocked. Piling into the big stock preparatory to threshing. That's a number 10. So, Section 39. Prohibition of pre-threshing. It shall be unlawful for either the tenant or the landholder without a mutual consent to reap or trace or portion of the crop in any time previous to the date set for its threshing. Any violation by either party shall be treated and penalized in accordance with this Act and or under the general provision of law applicable to the Act committed. Section 40. Place of crop division. The division of crops shall be made in the same place where the harvest has been threshed, and each party shall transport his share to his warehouse or barn, unless the contrary is stipulated by the parties. Chapter 3. Share tenancy on the crops other than rice. Section 41. Basis of the share in crops other than rice. The landholder and the tenant on land which produce crops other than rice shall be free to enter into any contract stipulating the ratio of crop division, and to the absence of stimulation, the custom of the place shall govern. Part 3. The leasehold tenancy. Section 42. Landholder, lessor, and tenant leasee defined any person not natural, juridical, either as owner, leasee, usufructuary, or legal professor or agricultural land who leases and rents to another said property for purposes of agricultural production and for the price certain or ascertainable either in the amount of money of produce shall be known as a landholder, lessor, and any person who with the consent of the former tells a cultivates or operates said land susceptible for cultivation by one individual, personal, or with the aid of a labor available from the amount his own immediate from household in a tenant leasee. So, Section 43. Rights and obligation of the tenant's leasee. So, with the creation of the tenancy relationship arising out the contract between the landholder, lessor, and tenant leasee, the latter shall have the right to enter the premises of the land and to the antique and the peaceful enjoyment thereof. He shall have the right to work the land according to his best judgment, provided this manner and method of cultivation and harvest are accordance with approved farm practices. Okay, Section 44. Rights of landholder lessor. So the landholder lessor or his duty authorized representative shall have the right to inspect the premises of land which is the subject of the list for the purpose of ascertaining the tenant's compliance with the provision of the contract and of this act, but in no case shall be exercised in any coercion, imitation, or violence in the word of death. So, Section 45. Manner and rental payment. Payment of the consideration for the use of a land may be made either in a amount certain or ascertainable in a money or in a produce or both. So Section 46. Section 46, consideration for the use of land. The consideration for the use of raised land shall not be more than 30% of the gross produce for first-class land and not more than 25% for a second-class land. The consideration for the agricultural land where exists fruit trees and other useful trees, plant, from which the whole or anything portion of the produce or of the said land is taken shall not be more than what have been specified into the preceding section. The consideration of for the use of sugar land, fish pond, and salt bed, and land devoted to the raising and livestock shall be governed by stipulation between the parties. So, Section 47, I mean. So, rental of work animals and etc. and applicability of schedule. So upon the agreement for the parties, the tenant listly for the mixture of such work animals from employments or service belonging to the landholder lessor and as are available for hire and consideration of which shall be based on their fair rental value. So Section 48, loan and interest. Loan either in money or in a kind obtained by tenant lessee or the landholder lessor shall be payable at the time it's simulated. So Part 4, security tenure. So tenure. And Section 49, ejectment of tenant. Now, withstanding any agreement or provision of law as the period, in all cases where land devoted to the agricultural purpose and held under any system of tenancy, the tenant shall not be disposed of his holding except for any of the causes hereinafter enumerated, and only after the same has been proved before and the disposition is authorized by the court. Section 50. Goes for the disposition of the tenant. Any of the following shall be a sufficient cause for the disposition of tenant from the holding. The bona fide intention of the landholder in cultivate land and himself personally or through the employment of a farm, machinery, implements provided, however, that shall the landholder not cultivate the land and himself, or should fail to employ mechanical from employment for the period of 1 year after the disposition of the tenant, it shall be presumed the acted in a bad faith and land and damage for any loss incurred by because of said disposition. So when the current tenant violates or fails in comply with any terms and conditions of the contract or any of the previous of this act, provided however that this a subsection and shall not apply when the tenant has sustainably and complied with the contract or with the provision of this act. The tenant failure to pay the aggregate rental or to deliver to the landholder shall provide, however, that this shall not apply when the tenant's failure is caused by fortuitous even force of major, and, and when the tenant used the land of purpose other than the specified by agree of the parties. Okay. Okay. When the shared tenant fails to follow those approved from practices which will contribute towards the proper care of land and increase agricultural production. So, when the tenant through negligence permits a serious injury to the land which will impair its productive capacity, conviction by the competent court or the tenant or any member or his immediate family or family household of a crime against the holder and member of his immediate family. So section 51, burden of proof. The burden of proof to show the existence of a lawful cause for the ejectment of a tenant shall rest upon landholder. So, Part 5. Special provision. Section 52. Duties of the Secretary of Agriculture and Natural Resources. It shall be the duty of the Secretary of Agriculture and Natural Resources to First, we have a conduct such educational programs as circumstances may require adequately to acquaint tenant and landholder with the rights and responsibilities under this act. Number 2 is revise the rental rates provide for the Schedule A and B whenever such a revision is made necessary by change in values and price so that the rental rate shall conform in the standard of fair and rental value as defined in Section 5. So, facilities to the preparation and registration of landholder tenant contract and instruction of appropriate printed form and instruction to guide and interest parties in drafting and executing and rental agreements. The form of contract must bear the approval of the court. So, number 4 is conduct surveys and research to determine the extent compliance, adaptability to different crops, and to different crops and areas, and firmness of this act to all parties and affected by its implementation. So number 5, last is not the least, submit an annual report to the President containing and analyzing showing the progress made toward attaining the objectives enumerated in Section 2 toward this act and recommendation considering improving implement and general effective of this act. Copies of this report shall be provided to member of Congress. So Section 53, duties of Secretary of Justice. The Secretary of Justice through executive judge of the court shall be responsible for formulating a national enforcement program among other and through the assignment for judge and personnel which will ensure the full enforcement of the provision of this act. And Section 54, representation by counsel. In all cases wherein a tenant cannot afford to be represented by counsel, it shall not the duty of the public defender of the Department of Labor of representing him upon a proper notification by the party concerned, or the court competent jurisdiction, and shall assign or opinion counsel the officio for the ended tenant. So, Section 55, applicability of general laws. The provision of existing law which are not inconsistent wherewith herewith shall apply to construct governed by this act, as well as the act or omissions by either party against each other during and connection with their relationship. So, Section 56, that's to be solved in favor of the tenant, and the interpretation and enforcement this act and other laws, as well as stimulation between the landholder and the tenant, and the courts and administrative officially shall solve all grave doubts in favor of the tenant. Okay. Section 57. Penal provision. A violation of any of the provision of this act shall be punished with a fine not exceeding 2,000 pesos or imprisonment not exceeding 1 year, or both, in discretion of the court. And Section 58, separability of provisions. If for any reason and any section of provision of this act shall be questioned in any court and shall be held to the unconstitutional or valid, no other section or provision of this act shall be affected thereby. And Section 59. Okay. Repealing provision. Republic Act Number 4054 as amended by Republic Act Number 34, Commonwealth Act Number 65-3, Commonwealth Act Number 461 as amended by Republic Act 44, and all laws, rules, and regulations inconsistent herewith are hereby repealed. Okay, the last, Section 30. Effective date. This act shall take effect upon its approval. Okay. Approved August 30 in 1954. Okay, that's it. Thank you and good evening, sir. Thank you.